September 16th, 1992. One man woke up that morning and decided to go to war. Not with an army, not with weapons, with money. On one side, the British government, one of the oldest, most powerful institutions in the world. The Bank of England, the British Treasury, the full weight of a G7 nation. On the other side, a single hedge fund manager, sitting in an office in Manhattan. By the end of that day, Britain had lost over £3 billion. Interest rates had been hiked twice in a single afternoon, first to 10%, then to 15%, in a desperate, humiliating attempt to survive. It didn't work. By 7:30 that evening, Britain was forced to pull out of the European exchange rate mechanism, a currency system it had staked its entire economic credibility on. The pound collapsed, and George Soros walked away with $1 billion in profit in a single day. This is the story of Black Wednesday, the day one man broke the Bank of England and got paid for it. To understand what happened in 1992, you need to understand one thing: the exchange rate mechanism. After decades of currency chaos in Europe, the major European nations agreed to link their currencies together. Each country's currency would stay within a fixed band. It couldn't rise too high, couldn't fall too low. The idea was stability. If all European currencies moved together, trade would be easier, inflation would be controlled, and Europe would slowly march toward economic unity. Britain joined the ERM in October 1990. It was a political decision as much as an economic one. Prime Minister John Major staked his reputation on it. The pound entered at a rate of 2.95 Deutschmarks. From the beginning, there was a problem. Britain's economy was weakening. Unemployment was rising. Interest rates were painfully high, squeezing homeowners, squeezing businesses. The natural move would have been to cut rates, let the economy breathe. But inside the ERM, Britain couldn't do that. Cutting rates would weaken the pound, and a weak pound would fall outside the permitted band. Britain was trapped. It was wearing economic shoes 2 sizes too small, and it wasn't allowed to take them off. George Soros was born in Budapest in 1930. He survived the Nazi occupation of Hungary as a teenager. He escaped communist rule. He built one of the most successful hedge funds in history, the Quantum Fund. By 1992, Soros and his team had been watching Britain for months. His chief strategist, Stanley Druckenmiller, had already identified the opportunity. The pound was overvalued, Britain's economy was deteriorating, and the ERM was forcing Britain to hold an impossible position. Druckenmiller told Soros they should bet against the pound, maybe $1.5 billion worth. Soros looked at the analysis. Then he said something that defined the entire trade. If the logic is right, why are we only going in halfway? Go for the jugular. They didn't bet $1.5 billion. They bet $10 billion against the pound. 10 billion. The logic was simple. Britain could not maintain that exchange rate. The economy was too weak. The political will was crumbling. And if Britain was eventually going to devalue, which Soros believed was inevitable, then the only question was timing. Soros decided to make it sooner. Here is how currency speculation actually works, because most people don't understand the mechanism. Soros borrowed billions of pounds from banks. He immediately sold those pounds for Deutschmarks. Now he was sitting on a mountain of Deutschmarks, and he owed a mountain of pounds. His bet: the pound will fall in value. If it did, he could buy those pounds back later, at a much lower price, repay his loans, and pocket the difference. The more the pound fell, the more he made. But here's the brutal part. As Soros and other speculators sold pounds, the selling pressure itself pushed the pound lower. The Bank of England had to buy those pounds, spending its foreign currency reserves, just to keep the pound within the ERM band. It was a war of attrition, and Britain was burning through ammunition faster than it could reload. The morning of September 16th, the Bank of England opened the markets by spending billions buying pounds. The pound barely moved. By mid-morning, the situation was critical. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Norman Lamont, announced interest rates would rise from 10% to 12%. Markets didn't blink. The pound kept falling. 2 hours later, a second announcement. Rates would rise again to 15%. Think about what that means. 15% interest rates. For British homeowners with mortgages, for businesses with loans, this was not a policy. This was an execution. And it still didn't work. Soros and dozens of other funds kept selling. The Bank of England kept buying. But there were limits to what Britain could spend. There were no limits to how much the market could sell. By late afternoon, Britain had exhausted billions in reserves. The pound was still falling. At 7:30 p.m., Norman Lamont walked out in front of cameras. His face said everything. Britain was suspending its membership of the ERM. The pound would be allowed to float. It was over. Soros closed his position. The numbers settled. $1 billion profit, one day. The British press called it Black Wednesday, a national humiliation, a catastrophic failure of economic policy. John Major's government never recovered politically. The Conservatives, who had built their entire identity around economic competence, were destroyed at the next election. Tony Blair swept to power in 1997 with one of the largest landslides in British history. Black Wednesday ended the Conservative era. But here is the twist nobody saw coming. Within months of leaving the ERM, the British economy started to recover. The pound fell, and British exports became competitive again. Interest rates were cut, and the housing market stabilized. Businesses could breathe. The policy that was supposed to protect Britain had actually been strangling it. And the humiliation that forced Britain out turned out to be the shock that freed it. By the mid-1990s, Britain was one of the fastest-growing economies in Europe. What politicians called a disaster, markets had already corrected for. Some economists quietly began calling it White Wednesday. George Soros became the most famous speculator in history. He was celebrated by some as a genius, condemned by others as a predator, a man who made $1 billion while ordinary British families struggled with rising mortgage payments and job losses. Soros himself had a different view. He argued he didn't cause the crisis. He identified a flaw that already existed. The British government had entered the ERM at the wrong rate, at the wrong time, for political reasons. The system was broken before he touched it. He just made the break happen faster. Whether you see Soros as villain or visionary depends on what you think currency markets are for. But the deeper lesson of Black Wednesday is not about one man. It's about the limits of government power over markets. Britain's government, with all its resources, all its credibility, all its tools, could not hold a line that markets had decided was wrong. No government can. When the fundamentals don't support the policy, no amount of intervention can hold the position forever. The market eventually wins. Black Wednesday proved it. Brutally, publicly, expensively. George Soros made $1 billion on September 16, 1992. The Bank of England lost over £3 billion. A Conservative government lost its reputation, and Britain's relationship with European Monetary Union was permanently, irreparably damaged, setting in motion a skepticism toward European integration that would echo for decades. One trade, one day, one man. And the ripple effects are still being felt today. The next time someone tells you that financial markets are just numbers on a screen, that what happens in currency trading rooms has nothing to do with real life, remember Black Wednesday. Remember the British families who couldn't pay their mortgages on that Wednesday afternoon, the businesses that shut down because rates hit 15%, the political careers that ended before the sun set. And remember the man sitting in Manhattan who saw it all coming and bet everything he had that he was right. History proved him correct. That's what makes this story one of the most extraordinary in the history of money.